Good afternoon, Mr. Pop.
Good afternoon, Godwin. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. Um, a few days left in the United States of America, and we're going to try and complete these videos. Correct?
Correct.
Good, good. Okay, so we've spoken about um, two of the three Holocausts uh, against the black man. The first being that of 1640 to 1645.
Correct.
The second being that of 1712, initiated by Willie Lynch.
Willie Lynch, that's correct.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk about a Holocaust which is relatively recent, in the 20th century, the 1920s to be exact.
Yes.
And it actually relates to a type of music, a very enjoyable type of music, which people would be familiar with, called Boogie Woogie.
Yes.
Now, the fact that music's very uplifting and fun, you wouldn't really associate it with something as negative as Holocaust. So, would you like to try and connect the dots for us?
Well, there was a period when mankind, modern man, was experimenting with a form of flight using a blimp, using very large blimps.
The Airbuses.
Yes, the huge blimps. In our area in the South, many of the storage facilities for the blimps were between Marshall, Texas, and Dallas, Texas. It actually was near my home. Shreveport is not too many miles away.
So Louisiana and Texas.
Right there at the border.
Right.
And what happened was, once the blimps fell out of favor, the hangars, as they were called, were still there. Now these hangars, a hangar, were several football fields inside.
So for those who don't know what blimps are, they're the very large oval airships, like oval air balloons. They often have advertising on there, but they're not used that frequently anymore. But especially during the 80s and 90s, when I was a small child, I would always remember, especially there was a particular Goodyear blimp.
Well, we still have them. They're used extensively here to advertise over sports media and that type of thing.
Okay, but it's kind of fallen off. That usage has fallen off in the UK, but it's, as you say, it's still prevalent in the US. But
and
yes,
they no longer use them as travel means.
But they used to before. And
oh yes.
This is the particular era that you're talking about.
Yes.
Just after they were used as forms of transport, they were kind of shut down and put into these hangars.
Well, the blimps were shut down, were dismembered. The hangars, in some parts of the U.S., you can still go places and see them. There are one or two left. But they're huge, huge constructions. And after the usage as airships, there were several great accidents that history records. They simply stopped using them and began to develop the aeroplane. But what happened was a particular product called kerosene and several other oils that come from pine trees.
Didn't you also mention turpentine?
Turpentine, that was really the largest manufactured product at one time.
So these were used with these blimps?
Well, these were used with in the hangars.
In the hangars, okay.
Blimps were absolutely nowhere to be found at that point.
Right.
And it took lots of people to cut what is called pulp wood, and then to manufacture turpentine and other oils out of it. And yes.
So we're saying that they would get these the logs of the trees.
Yes.
Put them into these former blimp hangars.
Yes, that was they had to burn it and and have the oils come out of the tree.
Right.
However, it took lots of manpower.
So it was a huge manufacturing.
Huge process. Manufacturing process that most people in the United States don't think about and didn't think about because they just used the product and they didn't see the process.
Now with turpentine, it's a very useful product, and you see it in most households.
Yes, today as well.
But you never really think of where it comes from.
Exactly.
But you were saying it comes from a tree.
Comes from pine trees.
Okay.
And when they originally began to manufacture the product and determined that it was going to be a useful product in the modern age, they needed some form of workers to manufacture it. Now it's a very dangerous process, manufacturing. A lot of toxic fumes comes out of the manufacture of this product. And what was decided to be done was they needed human labor. And here in the South, one of the means that they used was getting African American men. At first they tried to hire them, but they couldn't hire enough, nor could they. Once the men realized that it was a toxic process, they simply would quit. And so what the white men did was they put together their usual process. They would stop black men on the street. Maybe they were walking, as they saw, on the wrong side of the street. Perhaps they took a turn that was the white police decided were illegal, and they would arrest these men for just any little violation.
Now we're still talking about the era which was within the Jim Crow laws.
Yes, it was within Jim Crow laws and the periods, and so they really could do anything that they wanted to African Americans.
So, as you say, if a black man's walking down supposedly the wrong side of the road, they would arrest him, and they would be within their right to arrest him because of these Jim Crow laws.
Because of these Jim Crow laws, and by the way, Jim Crow itself was a form of a Holocaust, but this is a smaller Holocaust within the Jim Crow period.
Okay.
And a lot of times, people did not know where their sons, their brothers had gone. It took a long time before it was figured out what was happening by the black community. And so what they would do is would take these men up there and they would work them slave labor. And these men, of course, they couldn't get out. The places were guarded. And what they did was they entertained themselves. And you mentioned Boogie Woogie. Well, blacks have always been associated with music and music development in this country. The blues, what have you. Boogie Woogie was just part of that process. And it actually came out of that Holocaust. The men began to, they'd have an old piano or something. And Boogie Woogie is best played, by the way, using a piano. And so the little time that they had for recreation, they began to develop this music. It's based on a kind of a church beat.
Now, I do recall you saying to me that these old pianos would be kind of thrown away, yes, put into these hangars, and they would have missing keys.
Yes.
And they were kind of the black people who have been forced into slave labor.
Black men.
They
yes.
were kind of improvising,
yes,
on these pianos with the broken keys, and this is where the Boogie Woogie sound came from. Correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is pull it up and play it, and you will understand. If you have any musical talents, whatever, you will see the notes that they're playing. They're just playing a few notes to make this. There are some white entertainers that attempted to take Boogie Woogie as their own. Jerry Lewis was one.
Now you say attempt to take because when people are asked about Boogie Woogie, they will often reference Jerry Lee Lewis mm-hmm. as the pioneer
yes.
of Boogie Woogie.
Well, it wasn't so. What happened was Jerry Lewis's father was a traveling minister at the time. And he had a first cousin also known today as Jimmy Swaggart. He's a big preacher in the New Orleans area.
Okay, so Jerry Lee Lewis had a cousin called Jimmy Swaggart.
Yes.
Okay.
and they would travel with their father or their uncle.
Right.
And he would stop at these places to preach to these men.
Okay.
Who were incarcerated in these hangars.
Right. So Jerry Lee Lewis and his cousin Jimmy Swaggart.
They were young
boys.
boys. And so the men would be playing this music, and these boys began to hear it. And they would go off away from their father, and they picked up the beats. And that's where they got it from. So understand, Boogie Woogie was not developed by Jerry Lee Lewis. He simply picked it up in his travels with his kin who were, and that was one of the stops they made at these blimps.
Okay.
So it was as simple as that. But this is another Holocaust that occurred that you hear very little about. However, it's well documented in history. It's just not taught.
Okay.
But the point that I wanted to make about this period, great harm was done to the black families. Families looked all over the country for their kin. Nobody notified them that this is where these men were. And sometimes by the time they got them back, they were sickened unto death from the process of working this oil substance, this turpentine.
Now, if anybody sees news today and sees a article about missing persons, firstly, they're quite rare. Secondly, when they do happen, they are very distressing and disturbing to both the family and people around them.
Oh yes.
When a family member is just disappeared, you don't even have the opportunity to mourn.
Yes.
You're in a perpetual cycle of wanting to find out whether or not they're still alive. You'll have family. It can tear the family apart because you'll have family members saying that they're dead and we have to move on, and then family members who say always trying to
find them.
So this kind of thing was happening on a regular basis. Families were being destroyed on a regular basis.
Yes. My grandfather, Walter Rollins, put some of his land. He had to hawk it to get apparently one of my uncles out of there. He had to pay a ransom to get them out of there. And so for a long time during this period, black men, young black men in particular, did not travel alone. Once it was found out that this was going on in the communities, they were very careful to stay away from white people. And it kind of is part of what built this kind of paranoia. It's just one of the events that built onto the paranoia that the black man has, that there's a great fear of the white man because he will do something to him, to disappear him, as you say, just as what happened in 1640 to 1645, what happened in Jim Crow periods when sometimes whites would just lynch a black man. You didn't know where your son was, or your uncle, or your father was. And as you said, you can imagine the devastation it had in a family. After slavery, it was several years before blacks actually settled down, because many went about the country attempting to find their relatives who, while under slavery, had been sold off to other plantations, and they made great effort and used great fortunes to try and pull their families back together. This is rarely taught in history. Now,
from what you've just said, there's two very important things that we need to remember. Firstly, it's the paranoia. How we've shown here and previously that this paranoia isn't unjustified.
Oh no, it's based in total reality.
And there is never what's the phrase I'm looking for? There's no smoke without fire.
Exactly.
If there is a mass population who have the same type of thought process, if they see something as a potential danger, then obviously there has to be some type of truth behind that. And what we are seeing is that there's been events during history which have occurred, and this is the reason why there is a justified paranoia within the black man. That's the first thing. The second thing is that despite the abolition of slavery, the white man has continued to try and continue slavery itself.
Oh yes.
By different means. This one being by using supposed lawful incarceration in the Boogie Woogie period, the 1920s. But really, they're disappearing the black man. When Jim Crow laws got outlawed, the prison life became another way of recreating slavery.
Exactly. And against the black male in particular.
Yes.
Understand there was always this attempt to keep the black family apart.
Right.
This was where the strength of any civilization lies, is if it has a solid family core.
Right.
And when Willie Lynch pointed out that even during Roman times, this was the method used to control a population that Rome had either conquered or turned into slaves. It would always attempt to break down the family unit. And there was a constant pressure on the males. And so this went on from the time we came here, 1640, even until today.